Okay, so where are we up to? We've just done water metabolism. Module 4 now is the circulation of body fluids. Now this is really broken up into two main sections, which is the blood circulation and the fluid circulation, which includes lymph and all that sort of stuff as well. But for the purposes of pregnancy, it really doesn't make much difference. Both of these different areas that we use to challenge the circulation relate equally as well to pregnant women, because their circulation is affected, well, their blood circulation is affected. There's a lot of demand put on it. If you think about what's happening, you know, there's a little baby inside there that has its own circulatory system that's connected specifically to the mother's circulation. So she's putting arterial blood in, venous blood is coming back, plus lymph is coming back. Right? So the lymph goes in with the arterial blood, goes into the tissues and comes back to the mother. The mother's liver has the job of breaking down the proteins and toxins and stuff and taking them out of the bloodstream so that it can put nutrients back into the bloodstream to give back to the baby, as well as her own circulation and metabolic needs. That's a lot of work. Right? It only has to take a little bit of congestion for that to start to make a big effect. Now, if that happens continually over a long period of time, that will influence the rate of growth of the child. It can even cause complications later on at birth if the child is not strong. So there are 2 points that we use to challenge the different types of circulation. If we have a look at the chart, you'll see that they're listed here as 5 black dots. All right? The 5 black dots relate to your 5 fingers. All right? You're literally holding 5 fingers just below the second rib, halfway along the collarbone on both sides. Now, what I've found for pregnant women is that you can actually do these together, and it actually works a little bit better than if you did them individually. You could hold one set of points and then go through and reset the neurological activity behind it. But for pregnant women, if you hold both, and you only have to hold them again for about 30 seconds, but if she holds both points for 30 seconds, it's actually better because it has an integrative effect between the non-blood fluids and the blood fluids in the body. And for pregnant women, this is a much more important relationship than otherwise. Normally, if a person is not pregnant, you would do one or the other and reset the neurology for them, because you're then doing the blood circulation or you're doing non-blood circulation. But for women who are pregnant, you really actually need to do this holding the points together at the same time. Then, after having held those points for 30 seconds, then we go into tapping L5. Go over here. This is why the black dot is next to L5. It's not a separate point. It's the same point as before. The black dot is just illustrating this specific module. So you're tapping L5, then T9, right, and then T3. In that order. We're coming up this way. All right? Great. So, who's our volunteer for modules today? Oh, yes, Estefania. Want to bring your circulation fluids out here? Great, thanks, Diana.
Don't dig anything.
Yeah. Okay, so 5 fingers held like this. In this part, that's for the other side. Down a little bit. Here's the collarbone, right? You want the just below the second rib. So if you consider that the collarbone is your first rib, you can feel down for the second rib, Where is that second? There's the second rib. Just here. All right, 5 fingers here. Good. 5 fingers, same place on the other side. Down a bit. Yeah, good. Now, she holds those points for 30 seconds. Luckily, she's not pregnant.
I hope not.
Okay. She's not pregnant, and so as a consequence, this is not the way you do it. You do one and reset it, then you do the other side and reset that. But if she was pregnant, holding the two together actually works better for pregnant women. So then turn around. Okay, she can let go of the points, take the hair out of the way. Right, we go then to L5, where we were before, the base of the sacrum. Here, start tapping. She has a big breath in and out. Good. The second point is T9. Now, if you come to the base of the scapula, which is T7, T8, T9 lives in here. So we tap here, big breath in and out. And there we go, all the way up to T3. Now remember, the first knob down on the neck is C7, T1, 2, 3 lives in here. Big breath in and out. Good. Great. Around. So what that does now is it integrates the blood circulation with the circulation of other fluids. Now we've just spent a couple of minutes reorganising the circulation, or sorry, the presence of water and the metabolism of water. So now doing this module actually takes that water and helps it to circulate around the body. This is really good for when when there are problems with some people who don't have enough amniotic fluid. Right? There's things are going slow, the baby's not developing well enough. Quite often it's actually a circulation problem. So doing this in those cases really actually speeds up the growth of the baby quite enormously. In some cases also later on, when the baby is maybe in the wrong position for some reason, doing this at that time can often help the baby to get back into the right position again. There's a certain amount of fluid that's needed within the amniotic fluid, the amniotic sac, for the baby to move around in. And if there's not enough fluid, it'll get stuck. The actual sac will tend to stick on the baby, right? Because it pushes, right? It doesn't get stuck in the sense that it can't be taken off, but it almost like it molds onto the baby, and it becomes a preferred position, so the baby doesn't move very much. Now in the early stages that doesn't matter, but later on when the baby's actually starting to flex its own muscles and get itself in the right position, that does matter, and there must be enough fluid in the amniotic sac for the baby to be able to move around. Now a lot of women when they're pregnant will go and get the ultrasounds done, and they're usually told nothing about the sac. They're told about the baby, the heartbeat, oh look, there's his little genitals, oh look, he just smiled and winked at you, really cool stuff. But nobody's really paying a lot of attention to the sac. And the sac is what's maintaining the environment for the baby to be in. If there's not enough fluid in that sac, you can't see that very easily with an ultrasound. But if a woman does this all the way through her pregnancy, there will always be enough fluid in the sac for the baby to be able to not only move around, but dilate any excretions and things that are coming off the baby. At the same time, the amniotic fluid is creating like a cream substance that's put on the skin of the baby. Right? A lot of that actually comes from the amniotic fluid. that initiates the process, and so the creamy substance helps with the lubrication of the delivery of the baby, but it actually helps to feed the baby's nervous system. The skin comes from part of the dermal layers that turns into the nervous system. So the skin is actually a part of your nervous system. And that cream on the baby should not be taken off. There are some, customs and countries where as soon as the baby comes out, everything's wiped off the baby. That's one of the worst things you can do, because that cream is very, very specific for feeding the nervous system and training the skin to understand atmosphere. It's needed for that. You take that away and the baby will be sensitive to hot and cold for the rest of its life. Right? So you leave that cream on because it's part of the nutrients for the baby's nervous system to understand how to live in a non-water environment, because that's where it's been all its life. Okay? Great. Thank you. Good. Okay. That's Module 4. Module 5, which is the module that comes after Module 4, is called Hemorrhoids and Pelvic Girdle. Oh dear. One of the, I won't call it complaints, but one of the requests that we've heard a lot through Stephania's work and through clients is the problems with the pelvis and things like hemorrhoids. You can avoid most hemorrhoid problems with the previous module on the circulation of blood and fluids. Hemorrhoids is a congestion of blood in the lower veins, in the anus and in the sigmoid colon. And because of the pressure that has been applied to the lower abdominal area, the circulation in that area becomes quite affected in some women. Then later on, when they're actually having to give birth and there's a lot of pressure being put in that area, sometimes these blood vessels will come out of the anus, and later on they can, well, even then they can cause quite big problems, especially if they start breaking. So this is a way of creating a pelvic health, if you like, an environment in the pelvis where A, there isn't the pressure put on those veins that would eventually turn into hemorrhoids, and as well as that, it's resetting the musculature of the pelvis so that after birth, the pelvis will naturally go back to its normal position. Now that doesn't happen straight away. The reason the pelvis is able to open up and allow the baby out is because of the change of hormones changes the elasticity of the ligaments. All the ligaments in a woman are very, very loose. They will stretch. Then after birth, the hormones have to change their relative proportions, and the ligaments start to contract again and come back to the normal position. Well, in a lot of people that can take a long time, and in fact in some people they never go back to normal. So you can help the pelvis to go back to normal by stimulating the muscles in the pelvis to pull the pelvic bones back into the right position again. So part of this, or actually most of this module, is actually resetting the integrity of the muscles that help the pelvis to do whatever it has to do. So I've looked at this from lots of different perspectives, and through working with various people, I've come up with this set of processes that help people to reorganize these muscles in the most efficient way for most people. There may be exceptions, like if the woman has sciatic problems, this will help, but it won't get rid of the sciatica. The sciatica is a specific muscle called the piriformis muscle, and the sciatic nerve goes either between or behind the piriformis, and the piriformis has become contracted because it's now trying to stabilize the position of the woman, and it's become over strong, called hypertonic. So it's actually pushing on the sciatic nerve. Right? Now, this stuff will help that, it will help to relieve that, but it won't resolve it completely. You have to do other things to get that resolved. But for all of the other pelvic-related issues, lower back pain, tension, inability to sit in one place for long, all of those things will be resolved with this module. So let's see what it is. This is done lying and standing. Now, for the sake of the video, I'm just going to show this standing, but you would also then do this whole thing lying. Now, in your book, it actually starts with the lying example, lying down, but we'll do this with the standing version. So instead of lying on your back with a leg against the wall or some immovable object, you do it standing against the wall. So here's a wall, right, and I'm standing next to the wall so that the side of my leg is against the wall. So then what I do is push my leg sideways against the wall. I'm actually pushing it this way, and I'm using my bottom muscles to do the pushing. In fact, you're going to be using other muscles as well, and that's fine. But you primarily want to use the gluteal muscles to be doing the pushing. So you're standing against the wall and pushing for about 20 seconds. If you do that for longer, your muscles will tend to go into cramp, and then that's not helpful. Now, if you're pushing and you find that the muscles are starting to cramp, don't push so hard or don't push so long. Okay? But for the average person who has fairly normal muscle function, 20 seconds would be perfect. If you're pushing and you start to feel it cramp, then that's the time to stop. Don't push anymore if it goes into a cramping state. All right? Then just turn around and do the other leg, pushing the other leg out. Now this is activating the gluteal muscles, and they're the ones that are used to stabilize the pelvic area. They're also connected energetically to the reproductive organs that are maintaining the pregnancy. So they're very, very important anatomical components of maintaining a good pregnancy. And of course, any of these modules can be done at any stage through the pregnancy and should be practiced all the way through the pregnancy to maintain the integrity of the pregnancy itself. After having done the two legs, you then rub the pubic bone on either side. There are reflexes here that help those muscles to reset and to become very strong. 5.3, with the toes straight forward in the standing position, or if you're in your lying, the toes would be straight up. You put tension in the legs as if to pull them apart. So I'm putting tension in my legs and pretending to push them apart. I'm tensing the muscles again, right? I'm getting these muscles to spread my legs apart. Okay? It doesn't have to be for long, just the initial tension is enough. Then 2, with the toes pointing out, right? Standing, they're pointing out sideways. You put the same tension to push the legs apart. So you're actually trying to push from here to push the whole of the legs out. Of course, you're not going to because you've got your weight here. Also, when you're lying, right, you don't want to actually move the legs, but just have the tension to be pushing them in this direction. 3, with the toes pointing in, right, right, you do the same thing. Pushing with the same muscles to put the legs out. And the same thing when you're lying. Now, 4, you hold the little finger and the thumb together and you repeat the first So that is with the feet straight up. You can do one hand or both hands, it doesn't really matter. You know, it's probably a little bit more cosmic to do both. You go, oh, that's really good. And then you do it with your toes out, and then you do it with your toes in. Right? And it's actually a really good idea. No, we go into 5-point form. With the knees now bent and spread with the feet flat. Now, I'm doing it standing, so I'm spreading my knees, but my feet are on the floor with the toes in each position straight forward. Okay, so toes are straight forward, knees are apart. Toes in each position straight forward, out and in. Push the knees together with your hands while you push your knees out. So I'm going to push my knees out, but I'm going to push against them with my hands. Right? I'm just putting, so I'm pushing my knees this way, but I'm pushing my hands in. Right? Right? That's with straight in. So I now do it with toes out. And now do it with toes in. It's a bit tricky. Right? And you're doing the same thing with lying down. But when you're lying down, your knees are up, your feet are flat on the bench or the floor, depending on what you're lying on. You do the same thing again, the pushing, holding the little finger and the thumb. Now this is rewiring the circuits of the muscles into the nervous system. And when you're holding, there are the fingers, these relate to certain neurological pathways in your body. And while you hold this, the brain is paying attention to these neurological pathways. At the same time, you're doing this exercise, it's connecting those pathways with the muscles that you're activating. It does the rest. It will now organise how the muscles relate to each other, left, right, up, down, forward and back, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. But the effect of this is that the integrity of the muscles of the pelvis is really now much, much stronger. And you'll feel this, you know, obviously you can feel this yourself not being pregnant, but women who are pregnant have the bones literally floating around. So when they do this exercise, they feel much more stable in the pelvic area. There's more circulation, and so there's less chance of hemorrhoids. If they already have hemorrhoids, in some cases, while they're doing this exercise, the hemorrhoids have just disappeared. They just go back to where they normally should be. The circulation is increased, the swelling goes away, the inflammation goes away, and everybody's happy. So this exercise will also take away a lot of the pressure that women feel in the lower back, because obviously as their stomach, you know, pulls out forward, right, their lumbar section slides forward too. Now if the muscles in the pelvis are not stable, right, it gives way and it drops. So then the discs fall forward. It's very, very uncomfortable. I don't know personally because I've never been pregnant, but a lot of my clients who have this have really had a lot of pain and discomfort from this. They've had back pain all through their pregnancy. There's no reason for that to be. Really not. And doing these exercises really helps to not only stabilise the structure through the pregnancy, but it also means that after the birth, they recuperate so much faster. So much faster. Like within days, right, they're just back to doing their normal work. See, women are very dangerous because they don't know how to stop. You know? Even when they're pregnant, they're still doing stuff and doing stuff and doing stuff. Then they give birth, and they should have around about 2 weeks minimum to recuperate. Do they do that? No. As soon as they can walk, they're off doing stuff. Right? Now the trouble is with this is they'll walk sooner, they'll feel like they can do more, right? So you have to tie them to the leg of the bed. Right? Don't let them wander off and start lifting up cars and, you know, building houses and stuff like that. give them the security, the stability in their body through the pregnancy, but this will also make them more able to work harder later. Don't let them do that. Tell them they have to have the recuperation time, because in the long term it's going to be better for them to recuperate completely before doing other things. All they have to worry about after birth is feeding the baby. Because if they do these modules on the way through, everything else will complete itself naturally, very easily. So there is a little problem that my volunteer has disappeared, so we might have to ask for another volunteer. Anybody want to volunteer themselves for science? Oh, a pregnant mum. Oh, come on down. Bring the bump with you. And we'll see how this works. We'll do this standing because we don't have the lying down devices. Hello. And your name is?
Trina.
Trin. And do we have a name for bump yet?
No.
No, just bump. Okay.
Yes.
This is Trin and bump. So the first part of this is to lie on your back. Oh no, we're going to do the standing. Standing up, right, and you can use me as an immovable object. Push your leg against my leg, as if you're trying to not push your hip. Your body stays, and you're just going to push like that. Yeah. Okay. So off you go. Push your leg against me. Pushing, pushing, pushing. Good. So you can use this part of your body to do the pushing part. Good. Great. Okay, good. And then just come over this side. And you do the same thing this way. Push your leg against me. I'm pretending to be a wall. Okay. Or a doorway. You know, you can actually stand in a doorway and do both at the same time if it's a little narrow doorway. Stand in your cupboard and do stand in your fridge. Or come on, not your hips, your leg. Push your leg. That's it, good. Okay, so now, we'll take you back to this side, so for camera's sake. Now, what she does is rub either side of the pubic bone for about 30 seconds. All right, so what's happened is we've activated the gluteal muscles, and now she rubs the pubic bone, either side of the pubic bone, for 30 seconds, and that actually stimulates the lymphatic drainage from the muscles. So we're waking up the muscle and then draining the lymph away from it. That allows more circulation to occur in the muscles themselves. Good. Now, with the toes straight forwards, all right, what you're going to do is use the gluteal muscles to pretend that you're pushing the legs apart. All right, so just put a bit of tension in here to push the legs as if you're going to separate them. Okay, and she does that for, it will vary, you know, if a woman is really tired, she might only do this for 5 seconds, but it's better than nothing. If she's really energetic, then, you know, she can go on for ages. All right, good. Then the toes pointing out, same thing. Good. Toes pointing in, same thing.
Oh, then it was more difficult to use that part.
Yeah, more difficult in some positions because the position's challenging the different muscles. Right? That's what you want. That's the training of the muscles. Mm-hmm. Right, now go back to normal, but hold your thumb and little fingers together, pushing them apart, toes out, pushing them apart. I'm running through it a little bit quickly just to show you, you know, what it is. You could spend longer doing this depending on how you felt at the time. And then toes in, pushing apart. Good. Now comes the bent knees bit. So with your toes straight, bend your knees, all right? Bring the knees apart and push them together. with your hand. So push in, but keep your knees out. Good. Now, toes out, knees out, push them together. Great. Now, toes in, knees, bring your feet together. Good. Toes in, knees bent, out, apart. Come on, you can do it. Look, I did it before. And push them together. Excellent. And that's about it? Give her a clap. Yay! The last module for care during pregnancy, which probably isn't the last module. You'll probably discover other things that you can do to help yourself during a pregnancy. But this one is a big one. If you continue to practice the other modules through the pregnancy, you will probably not have a need for this one at all. This is the one for miscarriage. Miscarriage has to have two main components to be active for a person to lose the pregnancy. Now, there are many, many times where a woman will have a heavy period where in fact she's lost a fertilized egg. It happens a lot more than people seem to realize. And there are many reasons for that. A spontaneous miscarriage based on a genetic deformity or a genetic problem will usually happen, sometimes without the woman even knowing it. The genetic deformities means that either the sperm was deformed or there's some genetic material in the ovum that is not normal. And so it'll start the process, but it will finish the process very quickly, and the woman will just have sometimes an irregular period and eliminate the fertilized ovum. In that case, it's better for the miscarriage to happen because, had the child continued to go through and develop, it would have been deformed, probably disabled, and would have died anyway, which is usually the case. So these days there's a lot of miscarriages actually happening, but at very early stages. And this is part of the genetic system's way of refining the process and making sure that the people who go through the whole of the genetic process are the ones that actually get born, because then we are equipped to live life. With the genetic deformed fetuses and so on, they usually die at some stage in the process because they're not equipped to live in this life. So the sorts of miscarriages that we're talking about usually are not the ones based on deformed genetics. They will tend to terminate themselves naturally. If not, well, then the person, and these days there's lots of screening tests that people can take to define if they're going to have a Down syndrome baby, or there are other sorts of problems that may be existing, because the advances in genetic identifiers now is really very advanced, particularly in pregnancy, and they can tell so much about the fetus before it's born that it's almost like the mother is irrelevant. They're doing heart surgery on babies in utero. Well, they're doing surgery on the fetuses, which is the best time to make that sort of intervention, because the baby is able to repair so fast and so well, because that's the fastest growth time we have in our whole life. It's, the technology is amazing, really, really is amazing. But the technology is still technology, and it doesn't take into account the human factor. And literally, one of the biggest problems that women face in being pregnant is that they get sucked into the system. And the system doesn't allow them to be an individual. The system will determine that this or that or this has to be done to them because you're pregnant. Well, pregnancy isn't a disease, you know. In fact, it's not medically treatable, you know. And if people follow the modules in this program, then hopefully they will never have to get to this stage of, you know, protecting themselves against miscarriages. Miscarriages have to have an energetic imbalance, and they have to have a kidney imbalance. All miscarriages will have to have these two things. The energetic one has to do with how the meridian system is adapting and doing whatever it's supposed to be doing, or not. If it's not doing that, then we've got a bit of a problem. It might be okay, the person might be able to adapt to that, and a couple of weeks later they feel okay and they've avoided a miscarriage. But if they have those energetic imbalances and something happens to the kidney function, then they have that very high risk of having miscarriage. Now, there is a particular set of circuits that relate to miscarriage that are activated naturally in the case where there's a genetic deformity. It still involves the energetic pattern, and it still involves the kidney, but it's done deliberately and it's triggered by the genetic system. And it's going to happen. That will happen and you won't sometimes even know that it's happened. But if a woman has had a history, or rather her mother has had a history of miscarriages, and maybe her mother has a history of miscarriages, then there's a 80% more chance than normal that that woman will have a miscarriage. 80% is very high. Now, basically all that says is that mum had a kidney problem, and her mum had a kidney problem, and probably her mum had a kidney problem, because without the kidneys, you know, failing, or the certain circuits related to kidneys failing, you won't have a miscarriage. So you have to have these two things. So in the module, 6.1 relates to the energetic balance, and it's just a series of points. Spleen 10, large intestine 11, spleen 9, spleen 6, and liver 8. Now, for any of you who are acutely observant, you'll see that spleen 6 is a point that you do not use during pregnancy. And yet here it is one of the points that you use to prevent a miscarriage. But it has to be done in this order for that to work. If a person is susceptible to miscarriage based on familial history, you would never use spleen 6. Just don't go near spleen 6. Don't go near large intestine 4 either. There are a number of other points, and what I'll be doing is, if you make sure that Stephania has your email address, I will send you a document of all of the acupuncture points and what they're used for relative to, you know, women's function, not just pregnancy, but, you know, all of that stuff. These are the points that we know work. You know, I've read lots of books on lots of things. And in some books, they will say, this point is okay for such and such. And in another book, they say, this point should never be used for the same thing. You think, so who's right? Well, usually they're both right, but they haven't identified or described the circumstances clearly. So there are points that you should never use in these circumstances, but in other circumstances, they're the same points that you have to use. You have to. If you don't, it doesn't fix that circumstance. So spleen 6 is one of these points. In the case of threatened miscarriage, spleen 6 is mandatory because it's the part of the process that brings all the nutrition back into the fetal activity that's needed to have a strong baby. But that also relates to the nutrition to support the process of keeping the baby. But if the person had a family history of miscarriages, then you just wouldn't use spleen 6. By itself, you wouldn't use it. But in this order, it's mandatory. You have to. So the spleen 10 large intestine 11, spleen 9, spleen 6 and liver 8. In fact, in some books, liver 8 is not a point to be used for pregnancy either. And yet that's the point that actually stimulates the production of all the hormones and the nutrients through the liver that the pregnancy needs. So, but if you use these recipes and these formulas in the order that you're given, you're not going to have any problems with them. But then you have the physical balance. There's the illustration in there. We'll have a look at it now. The points for these are numbered in your book. They're a slightly different format. They've got a separate page in your book, but they're numbered. All right, so you just follow the numbers. You've got spleen 10 up here. Second one is large intestine 11, which is on the arm. In fact, what I'll do is I'll show you where these are on Estefania in a minute, because it's easier to see on a real live person where they are. But they're numbered in the book, so all you have to do is just follow them by the number. All right? So if you can count, you can't go wrong. The physical balance is done by, again, lying and standing. All right, I'll illustrate for you what the standing one is, but you need to do this lying as well. Now, someone asked a question before about doing these processes sitting. The previous module and this one need to be done lying and standing. The reason for that is that when the person's lying down, there's different neurological responses to things than when they're standing. They're very, very different. The standing, the greatest advantage of standing is that you're incorporating their response to gravity. Gravity is a really important factor when it comes to pregnancy, when you have to carry this very heavy packet around in your stomach for, months and months and months. And sometimes it's just the person's relationship to gravity that is the weak link, and that needs to be taken care of. So you need to do the standing to include gravity, or the effects of gravity, and you do it lying because the lying has a totally different electrical circuits related to the challenges that we're using in these modules. When a person is giving birth, they will tend to want to do one of two things. They want to lie down, or they want to give birth in a vertical position, like in a squatting position. And that literally comes back to how comfortable they are, how strong they are in these different positions. Well, if you balance them to lying and standing, they can do either or both equally well. They don't have to have a preference. And in the cases of miscarriage, you'll find that if you only do this in one position, say standing, then they can still be weak in the lying position, and they can still have a miscarriage in a lying position. So you do it lying and standing to take care of any of the possibilities that may eventuate. So the physical balance is specifically related to kidney, and if you know about the muscles related to kidney, we're talking about the psoas L3. The psoas muscle is the muscle that connects the femur to the lumbar, to the front part of the lumbar spine, and the lumbar L3, those fibres in that muscle are specifically related to the circuits around miscarriage. So if you know how to evaluate that muscle, and that unlocks in a normal position, then the person has a tendency towards miscarriage. All right, it's the L3 position of psoas. So 6.2, firstly, well, this is lying down, but we'll do it standing up. You hold the leg out straight and out at 45 degrees and 45 degrees up. All right, so you're out at 45 and you're out to the side at 45 degrees. This is the position of the psoas muscle L3, for those of you who know how to evaluate the muscles. With the leg in that position, you rub the 2 points, 25 mil out and 25 mil up from the umbilicus, for about 20 seconds. If we have a look at this point here, right, it's these two orange points. You've got 25 mil and 25 mil up. Right, these are reflex points for kidney, specifically psoas, and specifically at that point with the leg in this position, it's actually specifically stimulating the circuits relating to miscarriage, or actually relating to maintaining the pregnancy. So you've got these 2 points, but while the leg is in that designated position. Then, still with the leg held in that position, you hold the base of the skull just at the bottom corner for 30 seconds. Right? On the same side as the leg is held. Right? This is a neurovascular point, a circulation point for the kidneys. You have a lymphatic drainage point here, so the lymph and the circulation are changed very quickly, and that will help to reset the brain's understanding of the kidney circuits relative to maintaining the pregnancy. Very important. Then you do the same process, but for the other side. Now, normally when you do this in women who are really very susceptible to miscarriage, and they've probably already had a miscarriage, they're going to find it very difficult to even get the leg in a position and hold it there. It's just, oh, I can't do it. If they can get someone to help them, or they can put it on a cushion or something like that, great, then do that. To start with, that's better than not doing it at all. Now, for people who, are not too sure, they don't know if they're going to have a miscarriage, their mother had a couple, but, then you'll probably find that on one side it'll be okay, and on the other side, it's really hard to put it in that position. In other people, they can hold that position there for like half an hour and, there's no problem. Well, that's great, but you're still resetting the circuits that relate to maintaining the pregnancy, and that's the important thing. So even if you have no issues with miscarriage at all, you could still do this module and strengthen the circuits that maintain the pregnancy anyway. The only trouble with this is that it could extend the pregnancy. Now, there are times when you have to have a miscarriage. It's called birth. Yes. Right? The same circuits that start off the birthing process are the same circuits that create a miscarriage. They're exactly the same ones. But you don't want them happening too soon. And so this reorganises those circuits in maintaining the pregnancy so that when the right time comes, then the person can go into a birthing process. But it also makes this whole process a lot stronger, which means that the person, like the mother usually, can override the natural or the normal birthing time if they do this too much. She can say, well, no, I'm not going to give birth, tomorrow when I'm supposed to, and she does this stuff, and it goes past tomorrow and a few days later, and then she gives birth. That's not the way to use it. And some people have used this or similar processes to try to avoid having the baby at a certain time. Well, usually that's done by the doctors who want to go and play golf on the weekend, so they induce the mother to give birth so that they have time to go and play their golf. That's just as bad. Right? Now, so I would suggest that if you have a client or if you yourself have a family history of miscarriage, then you could do this process maybe once a month through the whole of the pregnancy period. Once a month seems like it's a really good timing. If you have threatened miscarriage, that usually relates to spontaneous bleeding, even spots of blood at various times through the pregnancy is not a good thing usually. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it's something that you need to be careful with. Then you would do this miscarriage process, strengthen the kidneys. Usually what's happening is that the placenta, right, is pulling away from the wall of the uterus. Right? And so there's some bleeding taking place. Now, the same circuits that control the placenta are the circuits that control miscarriage. The only addition to the placenta is liver. So you would run through the same process, but then at the end of it, you'd add rubbing the liver point. Right? This reflex here. But if you've already done the pancreas, the liver to pancreas, pancreas to liver module, then the liver should already be okay. But sometimes people will come to you, well into their pregnancy, and they say, oh, look, I've got spots of blood coming out. Well, then do the miscarriage module, plus any or all of the others, but certainly you'd need to add to the miscarriage module rubbing the liver, because the placenta is governed by the liver. In fact, really, the placenta is a liver. It has, liver functions attached to it. Where do we get to? Okay, so you've got the legs in a position standing. In lying down, you've got the leg in the same relative position, up 45, out 45, and then rub the points, hold the points. If they already have spotting occurring, then stimulate the liver reflex as well. If you do any of these modules and there gets to be an aggravation, like whatever symptoms the person has gets worse, that's actually a good sign. But those symptoms should not stay worse for more than 3 days. If anything gets worse and it stays that way for more than 3 days, there is something else going on that you need to pay attention to. Right? And then you get them to a licensed neurotrainer, get them to have a look at what's going on, or some other professional who knows, how to deal with whatever is happening. Usually, the pregnant women who come to you will have other professionals already involved in the process. Usually, there's a whole band of people attached. There's gynecologists and there's what do you call them? Doulas, there's midwives, there's, family are always ready to help, but they're usually not much help. So really, unless the family is educated pretty well, it's actually better to have most of the family well out of the way. The reason for that primarily is that the mother starts to pay more attention to what the family wants than her own needs. And that's not a good thing, especially towards the end of the pregnancy where she's getting ready to deliver. I remember we organised a home birth for Sierra, my second daughter. And, I'd made the big bath up and everything's nice and fixed up, and Jenny's sister was there. And Jenny's sister is a real big mouth. She's talking to her, and what about this, Jen? And what about that, Jen? And what about that? And Jen's like, well, I'm trying to pay attention to this. Kathy, get out of here. So she sent her mum and her daughter out of the house. Go away. Leave me alone. We had a really good midwife there. I was there. I was doing balancing. The midwife was learning stuff off me. She actually later on did neurotraining courses. And Jenny's sitting there with this big bump in the water going, now I can relax. Then it started. Up to that time, she was so tense because mother was there, sister was there, and she was paying more attention to them than she was to her own process. Now, if you understand oxytocin and the effect that it has in that process, you'll realise that while a person, particularly a mother ready to deliver, but actually all through pregnancy, a woman is developing high levels of oxytocin, building. Plus there are other hormones that are, in conjunction with that, but oxytocin is the primary one. Now, oxytocin doesn't like to be upset. And it's upset most by adrenal hormones, stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol in particular. ACTH, which is the hormone the pituitary makes to produce the adrenaline through the adrenal glands, if ACTH comes in contact with oxytocin, it kills it. It neutralizes it. So the more the pituitary is putting out signals of, make more stress hormones, the greater the chance is that the woman's oxytocin levels are going to go down very fast. That's not good for the birthing process, because she actually needs oxytocin and progesterone and other hormones to actually help with the birthing process. It makes the whole process so much easier for the woman and for the baby if there's high levels of oxytocin. So that means you have to eliminate anything that's going to drop the levels of oxytocin. That's any stress, any distraction. All she has to do is think about nothing. The reason why she should think about nothing is because the production of the oxytocin is not produced by the higher parts of the brain, it's produced by the lower parts of the brain. It's a very primitive response. But think about it, it's how humans deliver other humans. You want that to be really calm, gentle, loving. You want it to be a great experience, because then life gets to be a great experience. But that doesn't happen if you're thinking about the dinosaur that's trying to talk into your left ear, called mother or mother-in-law. It's like, go away. Right? And you can tell when this is happening, because when a woman has too much stress hormones in her bloodstream and she's trying to give birth, or she started her contractions, she'll start getting angry at everybody. She'll get angry at her husband, she'll get angry at the midwife, she'll get angry at the world, she'll start swearing and carrying on. And what she's trying to do is burn off the stress hormones so she can get back in touch with the oxytocin. And they say, no, don't worry, darling, it's okay, just relax. No, make her more angry. Because the faster she can get angry and get it out of her system, the faster she can get back into the oxytocin and continue the process. That's usually with women who've already had too much stress for too long and they don't know how to control their adrenal system. It's unfortunate, but it's true. If they do these processes all the way through, that's not going to happen. If you combine this one with the workshop called Feed Your Glands, which is the adrenal balancer, also blood sugars, you do that in combination with this and they have such a nice birth process. Their adrenal system's under control, their blood sugars are regulated properly, they've got all the water and hydration processes going on here, everything just flows really lovely. So one of the reasons I talk about that is that the stress levels and the stress hormones can get to a point where it can create a miscarriage. Obviously at the birthing time, they can be used by the woman to overcome fatigue. And it's a little trick that some midwives and other doctors and gynecologists have used to help a person to get pregnant, is to make them angry. Not get pregnant, rather to give birth, is to make them angry. So they really get reactive, and that gives them like an extra shot of energy, and they can use that to finish off with their contractions. That's really not the best way to do it. In fact, that's probably the worst way to do it, but it can get the job done, and it can avoid having caesarean deliveries, through complete exhaustion by the mother. The trouble with that is it creates a fetal distress syndrome in the babies, and their heartbeat starts to go crazy, and all sorts of dysfunctions can happen in the fetus by doing that. So obviously the best source, the best process is to increase the oxytocin. That means remove all distractions, remove all stress. Doesn't matter who they are, just get them out. There's a doctor in France, I forget when he was practicing, but it was quite a while ago. His name was Dr. Laboyer. And the Laboyer birth process was really aimed at teaching people how to do it nice and calm, just the father, just the mother, nobody else. They were educated well into the processes, that was done in almost complete darkness, comfortable, if they wanted just quiet music in the background. The end result was that they never had any complications with the birthing process. Everything was fine. And the babies were born and developed into really very happy people, because the amount of oxytocin produced by having that type of birth is so high that the person really has an expectation that life is going to be fantastic. That's why, when you have, a good meal with good friends, it gives you that extra sense of wellness, of feeling good, because it's a bonding process, because it produces more oxytocin, right? And you feel close to the people. And that feeling is not only, makes the excretion of oxytocin more prevalent, but the more oxytocin there is, the longer the feeling lasts. Right? So if a woman has that feeling of contentment, ease, comfort, and security, then the birthing process is natural. It's totally natural. And it's a very important factor to have all of the things that would fight the production of oxytocin taken away. All right? So it makes me wonder what women go through when they go into these birthing centres in hospitals that are very clinical, lots of light, really noisy. Often the woman doesn't even know what the procedure is because somebody new comes in she's never seen before. The oxytocin is just going dung, 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 and the adrenals are coming back up again. It makes it so difficult, and it's no wonder that these women labour on and labour and labour and labour, and they get exhausted because they're trying to do it through adrenal function, because the oxytocin isn't there to help them in the natural way. So you always want to remember that the best format for any sort of pregnancy or delivery is tranquility, tranquil, calm. That by itself will produce more oxytocin. Right? She needs to be told nice things about herself, about her baby, about her life. She doesn't need to be told that she's doing it wrong, or stop, or go. No, there's no way that you can command the process as people have been practicing. The process is going to happen naturally if you let it happen naturally. All right? So just eliminate all of those things that may distract people from having a normal, natural birthing process. Okay, so we're going to go through the Module 6 process. Now, the first thing to do is the energetic patterns. All right, you always get that done first. So you follow the order of the points, and in your books you can see the positions of these things as they are on the charts. So spleen 10, now you do these on both sides. I'm only going to do it on one side for the sake of time. So you start with spleen 10, right, which is up here above the knee. Right? So if you want to rub that point, right, and just rubbing these things for 20 to 30 seconds is usually enough. If the points are sore or tender, you would tend to rub them until that tenderness disappeared. So in some cases you might be rubbing for a couple of minutes because there's a lot of activity at the point. Okay, then we come up to large intestine 11. Just bend your arm a little bit, and you get a little crease forming here where the top of the flesh falls. Just below the crease is large intestine 11. All right, so if you want to rub in there. And if the person's not sure, they can feel around, and usually they can find a tender area there. And again, 20 to 30 seconds. Good. Now we go down to the legs again. All right, you can just hold that up a bit. Right, here we had spleen 10. If we go the same distance below the kneecap, you have this little indentation. That's where you rub for spleen 9. Great. Excellent. Now, spleen 6, if we go right down to the bottom here, you'll see that spleen meridian comes up this way, up to 9 to 10. So around about 4 finger widths up is spleen 6. And if you're not too sure where the points are, you can rub the area and that will do the same job. Okay, I'm going to rub down there. Now, a reminder, you'll be doing these on both sides. So you do one side, then the other side. Okay. And then the last point in the set is liver 8. Right? You go to the patella, the knee bone, you go to the middle, and straight across to the outermost point, and that's liver 8. Of course, this stimulates the liver organ itself directly and all of its related functions. Great. Now, after having done all of those points on both sides, the energetic pattern now is there to support maintaining the pregnancy. But without the physiological connection to that energetic pattern, it may not last very long. So then we go in and do the physical balance. So in this case, we're doing it standing. So she puts her leg out 45 degrees and out sideways 45 degrees. Good. And she rubs these 2 points here that relate to kidney. You rub your kidney points. Good. And I'll just hold her up a bit because it's sort of a bit like doing ballet with high heels and putting your legs out like this. This is a good practice for the dance squad. All right, so she keeps holding her leg out and she holds the back of her head. I'll turn her around. All right. Pull this around. All right, it's really at the base of the skull, right on the bottom corner on both sides. The leg is still held out. And she just holds that point for at least 30 seconds. This is a holding point. You don't rub this one. You just hold it. Okay, so then you would do the same thing for the other leg. Okay, down. All right, I'm not going to run through that. You can see what the process is. So you're holding the leg up and you're running through these points. Now, she would then do that lying down, either on the floor or a bench or wherever, the bed, whatever, and she holds the leg, rubs the points, holds these ones, to make sure that the standing and the lying positions are completely covered. Okay? And that's it for the miscarriage module. As I said before, if the woman is already experiencing any spotting or bleeding spontaneously through the pregnancy, at the end of this, she would rub the liver point. Okay? It just reinforces the liver to pay more attention to what's going on with the blood chemistry. Very good. All right. Thank you very much.